Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be going over day number 2 of the Manchester Major, which is the end of the first phase. So the end of the plans. 6 games to talk about today, so I'll try to keep up the pace a little bit. SSG versus Bleed, first up, 2-1 victory for SSG. This is a rematch from 6 Invitational, the most recent one. SSG won that one 2-0, but they were a couple of close maps. And in this one, we see a close first map, but then the opposite of a close map in maps number 2 and 3. And I wonder if we've ever seen this before. Has a team ever lost the first map and then went on to back-to-back 7-0 the other team? Let me know if this has ever happened. I'm not actually sure. It could be the very first time. SSG, they probably should have won Clubhouse. They were up 5-2. And Bleed gets the first round, and then SSG a couple or 3 even, Bleed, and then 2 for SSG. So yeah, they're up 5-2, but then they let Bleed win 5 in a row. They're not even able to push overtime, and it's looking pretty bad. I mean, if Bleed carry this momentum, if the last 5 rounds is any indicator, maybe SSG is in trouble, but it looks like maybe Clubhouse just isn't that strong of a map for them. I guess they're picking it as a fairly high priority, or at least not banning it highly, because they also played it against Cruelty. They went round 15 against them, so barely beating Cruelty and then losing against Bleed. Maybe Clubhouse just isn't a great map for them, but turns out Bank is a phenomenal map for them because they 7-0 Bleed after having 7-1 Cruelty, so 14-1 on the map overall at the event so far. I imagine this is going to be banned against them for the rest of the event unless a team, I mean, just really needs to play Bank because of their map pool or whatever, or if they've cooked up some truly devious counter strats. And then SSG also apparently really good on Cafe and or Bleed really bad on Cafe, or just the SSG freight train could not be stopped. Some combination of those factors, but absolute destruction. I mean, yeah, 7-0, 7-0. You got to be happy if you are an SSG fan like I am. And looking at the stats for the match, obviously Bleed is going to have terrible stats. They lost 12 more rounds than they won. It is what it is. I guess Asphy and Reaps close to even, but the rest of them got smashed. And then Fultz plus 20, 4-0 on entry, 85% cost, 50% survival rate. Crazy stuff. Even a couple of plants to boot, a bunch of plants on SSG, not a single one on Bleed. And do keep in mind that Fultz, I think he went in like 18-8 or 18-10, something like that in the first map, which they lost. So some of his positive differential here is certainly meaningless, but you know, if his team had backed him up a little bit more in map 1, they probably would have won this series 2-0. But regardless, I don't think you can discredit Fultz. Crazy performance, easily the best player throughout play-ins, statistically, you know, very clearly. And really good stuff on entry. That's not really his role these days, but once upon a time, he was one of the best entry players in the world, so good to see this sort of stat line. And then Ashen and J9O, they've been good for SSG for quite a while, especially J9O. He's been so consistent for so long. This guy's a menace. And then Iconic and Forest continue to be the 2 worst performing players on SSG, but it didn't really matter with the result of this game, and their stats aren't even that bad. I do want to point out Forest, especially on Bank, some really impressive utility play on the likes of Twitch and Thatcher and Captau. Really good stuff, and I imagine also really good stuff in the comms and the coordination department to get a lot of that stuff done. So stats don't tell the whole story. And Iconic, he had a brutal first map, 1-10, but in the 2 maps that they did win, he went 14 and 5, right? So really good stuff. I think he had a mediocre second map and then a crazy good third map going like 10-1 or something. So they all showed up at different times in different ways, but SSG, they look pretty solid right now. And Bleed falling a little bit short. I think SSG was certainly the favorite, but I don't think that anybody thought they were going to get the 7-0, 7-0. So on to the second matchup, GK versus Liquid. Oh, and by the way, that was a qualification match. So SSG, with winning this match, they are on to phase number 2. And same thing for Liquid here. This is the match to put one of these 2 teams into phase number 2, and Liquid is the one that takes it. And not a whole lot to talk about here. 7-4, 7-5. So not an absolute smashing, but pretty convincing, right? No overtime and not even double max regulation or anything. No map 3. None of that. Liquid pull it out. I think GK fought a little bit better than I expected them to. I thought this would be maybe like a 7-3, 7-4 kind of thing, so they got a couple more rounds than I expected, but you know, decent, I guess you'd say. Maya and Nesk and Palu all pretty impressive. Resets and Lagonis a little bit less so, but still fine. And yeah, that qualifies Liquid. GK have one more shot. Same thing with Bleed. Let's move on. We have Cyclops versus Cruelty to send one of these teams home. So Cruelty lost against SSG, Cyclops lost against Bleed. If you lose again, you're out. And yeah, Cruelty's out and they get destroyed 7-5, 7-1. So at least a close Consulate, but then not a close Oregon. Cruelty go home. And I think very, very clearly at this point, LATAM, Mexico and the surrounding areas. And I point this out because LATAM used to include Brazil, but no longer, right? Brazil is now its own well-defined region. The current day LATAM, pretty clearly the worst region in the game, need to get their stuff together. And yeah, I think not even a lot to talk about in terms of the stats. Pyrox, I think by far their best performer, not only in this matchup, but in the previous one. So maybe a little bit of a star, shining much brighter than the rest of his team. Maybe we'll see him on a different team in the future. We'll have to see. And yeah, I guess just everybody on Cyclops showing up. And then we'll move on. Number 4, Fear X versus G2. This was the biggest upset of the play-ins for sure. And I think after everything said and done at this event, this could well end up being just the biggest upset of the whole event. I think G2 was like a super lock. Nobody thought, on here, I don't know how many people voted, but 100% of them thought G2 was winning this. Nobody thought Fear X would win. And especially on Bank, G2 have been exceptional on Bank, and they lose 7-4 to Fear X. So some crazy stuff happening on Bank in the play-ins. It is shocking for this to happen to G2, for G2 to allow this to happen. And there was a little bit of a debacle with their coach after the matches, and you can look into that if you'd like. You can find it on Reddit. I'm not going to go into that, but maybe we'll be seeing a staff change or a roster change in the near future with an org as high profile as G2 and a result this poor. Maybe it's inevitable, but maybe not. We'll have to see. Yeah, nobody on they don't even look that impressive, like stat-wise, and I guess because they got 7-0'd on Consulate. And so, G2, just like they did against Liquid, they won more rounds than they lost because they went -3 here, they went -3 here, but they went +7 here. So they won one more round than Fear X did, but Fear X got 2 maps. That's all they needed. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about this one. G2, they've struggled within their region a lot of times, but usually they make really good runs at the events once they make it there, but not this time. Absolute last place tragedy for Doki. It's not his home country, but it's still, United Kingdom there. I guess he has the UK flag, but I think he's actually Scottish, so a little bit different, but I'm sure it still stings pretty badly. Okay, and 2 more matches to talk about. Bleed versus Fear X, and yeah, Fear X, they're coming off of defeating G2, and they take the first map just barely, but they do take it round 15, and then the second map also overtime. And Fear X really let this one slip. They were up like 6-3. Is that what it was? Yeah, 6-3. Bleed has to win 3 in a row to push overtime to keep themselves alive, not only in the series but in the event. But they do so, right? 3 in a row, and then they even make it 5, including the 2 overtime rounds. So 5 rounds in a row to close out the map on Clubhouse, just like they did against SSG. That was from a 2-5 rather than a 3-6, but still same thing, 5 rounds in a row. And then we go to Chalet, and it's just a pretty convincing Bleed victory, 7-3, no overtime required, like it was in the first 2 maps. And yeah, Bleed was the expected victor, I guess. Coming into the event, yeah, Bleed were much more of a favorite than Fear X were, but Fear X did have that just having beat G2 factor going for them. And Reaps, another crazy performance, 40-22 is pretty impressive. And 6-3 on entry is good as well. And then over on Fear X, no real standouts. I guess Mephi at least managing to go slightly positive. Just look at the difference in the kill numbers. These guys have so many kills. These guys have, I mean, they still have a fair number of kills because a lot of rounds were played, but still a lot more kills over on the side of Bleed. And now let's move into that final matchup, GK versus Cyclops. So GK, they won their first one, and then they lost against Liquid, a respectable showing, but not phenomenal. And unfortunately they fall to Cyclops. So after winning that first one, yeah, they lose 4 maps in a row to be eliminated from the event. I had them pegged as 0-2 as far as series, but they get eliminated. Nonetheless, I did predict Cyclops. This is the first time this org has ever made it out of groups or equivalent. It's not actually groups at like this event, right? It's play-ins, but this is the first time the org has ever made it out of the initial stage of an international event, and I mean, good for them. They're always getting grouped. It seemed like they got cursed when they lost that tiebreaker match to Team 1 way back in Mexico in 2021. Maybe the curse is broken. Maybe it's time to see a little bit of a run. I don't expect them to go deep, but it is cool to finally get to see them beyond the initial phase of the major, and this is a slaughter for the very final game that I'm talking about, because the Bleed Fear X game actually ended much later than this one, because they were happening simultaneously, but this was obviously a really quick one. Cyclops destroy him. I had some people telling me that if this happened that GK would win it at least decently, if not convincingly, but no, it is Cyclops that take it down, vindicating my prediction. In terms of the stats, yeah, again, a good group performance. I guess some players doing better than others, but everybody doing at least decently well over on Cyclops, and nobody doing especially well on GK. Key, once again, being their worst performer, unfortunately, and that is GK going home along with the other 3 teams. And so let's recap the bracket. This is how the bracket played out, and we have SSG and Liquid advancing via the upper bracket, and Cyclops and Bleed advancing via the lower bracket. I predicted SSG correct in the correct spot. I had Liquid correct, but through the lower bracket, and I had Cyclops through the lower bracket, so correct as well. Bleed was the one that I did not predict. This probably should have been G2 in most people's estimation, but no, it ends up being Bleed, souring my predictions just a little bit. But still, I'm glad to see them go through. I want to see what else they have to offer. They are, if nothing else, a really fun team to watch. One final thing before we close out, these are again the matches for phase number 2. I don't actually want to do predictions here. If you want to hear some predictions, go watch that previous video where I update my event predictions. So I sort of I don't really do like specific match predictions, but I do it for the entire event. Again, probably go watch that one. I'm sure more people will watch that one than this one, but just on the off chance you're watching this and haven't seen that one, go check it out. But unfortunately, a little NA versus NA action here, a little Japan versus Japan action here, some APAC versus APAC, even if they're not the same region. So a few unfortunate ones to see in round number 1, but I think that's inevitable. You're going to see some intra-regional matchups throughout Swiss at some point. I think some people are excited to see Furia versus BDS, but not in a best of 1 in the first round. Maybe we'll see it again later on in the event at some point in the top 8. We'll have to see. But okay, I think that's going to do it. So I'm not entirely sure what the rate at which I'll be uploading for the rest of the event is, but unless something changes, I am planning to stream at least some of the matches on Sunday. They start really early, but tune into my Twitch. That'll be linked below. Also, give me a follow on Twitter, like the video, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I will catch you guys next time.